Minister and a patriot who devoted his life to protecting his country. He was not universally respected, but dignitaries from 21 countries, including a large contingent from Canada, attended the ceremony. Joining us now in the studio, Steve McDonald, the Associate Director of Communications for the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. Mr. McDonald, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Ariel Sharon, many people remember him as being very bellicose. He was a very aggressive man. He was a very successful soldier. Will that be his legacy, or will he be remembered as the Prime Minister who pulled the settlers out of Gaza and allowed Gaza to the Palestinians? Well,
it depends on who you ask, I guess. But Ariel Sharon was a man who really did, I think, alienate people on the far right and the far left. And in so doing, he galvanized a broad centrist component of the Israeli public. This is a man who, you're quite right, early in his career was known for being an excellent military commander who routed the Egyptians twice in the Sinai Peninsula and then proceeded to really crack down on terrorism when Israel was facing immense security threats in the early 2000s in the form of suicide bombings. On the other hand, this was the man who pulled out every last Israeli from the Gaza Strip in 2005, thereby alienating the Israeli right, but creating conditions for peace in the Gaza Strip that, unfortunately, the Palestinian leadership hasn't capitalized on.
Well, you know, it's interesting because people wonder why he did that. I mean, the optics were horrible. There were women and farmers carrying their children, weeping, being escorted by soldiers from the Gaza Strip. It didn't play well politically, and many people thought he was not, in fact, offering an olive branch to Palestinians. He was, in fact, giving the world an opportunity to see what would happen if you left this land to Palestinian control.
Well, there's some truth to what you're saying. I think at the end of the day, Sharon did it because it was in Israel's security interest to remove 9,000 Israeli settlers from a population of 1.5 million Palestinians. But on the other hand, he did create the condition for, or the room for, a potentially peaceful democratic society in Gaza. Unfortunately, that opportunity was derailed by Hamas when it took over Gaza and proceeded to fire thousands of missiles and mortars into Israel. And although that, again, was controversial from Israel's perspective, I think at the end of the day, most Israelis, according to polls, do support the decision and probably would do it again if given the chance.
It's been said that Sharon was the last of the founding fathers who were around from the beginning, fought all those wars, helped build Israel into the state it is today. Is there going to be a new Israel now that that early guard, the old guard, is gone? Does the country go in a different direction, or does it follow in the same path as Sharon and all the other leaders before?
Well, in any democracy, there are many politicians, but very few leaders. And I think everyone agrees that Ariel Sharon was a leader, whether you loved him or whether you didn't love him. And I think you're right. I think that there is a new generation of Israeli leaders coming up. Benjamin Netanyahu still is from an older generation of leaders, but there are young politicians who are up and coming, and you just can look across the political spectrum from left to right, and you can see them gaining in popularity. And so I think you're right. This is the end of an era to some extent.
Does it hurt, or does it matter to Israelis that only 21 countries were represented at the funeral?
I don't think it makes a big difference at the end of the day. He wasn't a sitting prime minister. This was a long time coming. He had been in a coma for 8 years. I don't think it's any reflection on Israel, to say the least. But it's often forgotten in all of this coverage that Ariel Sharon was a very human man. This is a man who was twice widowed. He lost his first wife in an accident at a fairly young age. He lost his firstborn son in a different accident just a few short years later. He was a man who really did have a tragic life to some extent, and gave his years to the country, made immense inroads in preserving Israeli security and, again, creating the conditions for peace that haven't yet been capitalized on. But I think he will have a positive legacy in the eyes of Israelis moving forward.
Steve McDonald from the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs. Good to see you, sir.
Thank
you very much. Canada is